Well, we got no chapter last week because apparently he was on holiday break. Maybe. I don't really know how these Hollywood breaks things go, but now we actually got Eden Zero chapter 172. And I cannot help shake this feeling. Are we actually reaching the end already? Because this almost felt like an endgame kind of chapter, or a foreshadow of an extremely strong despair. Given the fact that this manga has been one with despair, it's very likely it can be that. Granted, however, Hiromashima did say this was not going to be as long as Fairy Tail, but it was going to be a little bit longer than Raidmaster. So I always imagined something along the line of around 350 or 400 chapters. So yeah, maybe this could be it. Or maybe this could not be it. Either way, because if this is not it, then Siggy may very well win this battle. Or something else happens. After all, we still haven't resolved the thing about the other Orashion says, unless of course they was taken out off screen. If they're taken out off screen, I'm gonna believe that this manga is actually wrapping up faster. But we'll get to that when we get to that, I guess. Because this is me, the Angry and Offended Despair reviewer, although I technically mostly just review Eden Zero nowadays. And this is chapter 172. They picked up Captain Connor last time, and we actually learned something about this Connor here. I actually thought that there was an alternate Connor again, and technically this is an alternate Connor, but it's a little bit stranger. Because this is actually implied to be the same Connor that, yes, both was the captain of Eden's one and the one that they saved before. So how is this possible? Well, Noah, as we meet him in this chapter, seems to suggest that when Rebecca cat leaps in a specific way, they do not enter another world, they enter another universe. Universe 1 is where Shiki died. Universe 2 was is when he lived, they defeated Draken, but then they likely died fighting Nero. Remember when Siggy said, you made the wrong choice. Because now it is implied it wasn't the wrong choice, but it still was a choice of despair, which ended up killing Witch. So it's likely that Siggy said that, because again he said, Shiki saw I can no longer see what is happening. Likely he saw what is happening in that universe. So this is likely to be Universe 3, and it's implied that when this reality happens, Connor was never the captain of Eden's One. Oh, there is so much confusing to do here, so let's just jump into the summary. He talks to the crew, Connor, on dinner, and is amazed that there are children that can actually fight Siggy. And he's even more shocked when they mention that they are going to liberate the universe from Siggy, and heading to the direction he was. So he confesses that the planet that Siggy produces robots on is a perpetually motion planet called Lendard. It is here that we actually see Noah talking to Rebecca, and he hasn't really aged that much in 3 years. And Rebecca immediately begins to question if he knows anything about what kind of world they're in. And it actually turns out that now they're in the world of 416. Because it actually reveals that every time that Rebecca uses her power, they end up in a different world. However, which causes her to be a little bit unsettled. However, Noah does clarify that the power of reverse, the one that ends up in a different world, is not necessarily a different world. There's no changes to the overall. It may change her and those around her, but history will correct itself and head towards the predetermined future. So the greater future did not change. So that is so the world that they ended up in. That is usually the world that always is the case. It just saves her and her friends. However, when she cat leaps before, when for example saving Shiki from death and everything, he calls that the universes, and then says that Shiki died in Universe 1, and now they should be in Universe 3, because he actually believes that in Nero, Rebecca cat leaped before and saved them from Nero's 66 destruction. However, Rebecca herself do not recall that. Granted, however, she did say to Shiki pretty strongly, "No, we have to move now." So the moment she used her cat leaper could very well have been there. It's not but Noah is also surprised that Rebecca seems to have no knowledge of that. So because he could, after all, his god eye can detect when something like that happens. So he believes they have moved into Universe 3. Uh, uh, and Rebecca asks if that is the world before we. If he knows the future of the world before they move away from it. However, Noah says he can only predict the future based on position of the world's inhabitants. But however, he does predict that if they stayed in Universe 2, everyone would have died. So it's then that we see the scene when Siggy proclaimed to Shiki that he made the wrong choice. Because it actually turns out that wasn't the wrong choice, but which has had to be sacrificed for that. Maybe that is a sign that other Valkyries can be revived after all. I certainly hope so, at least. But yeah, I guess it makes sense. I mean, I forget what I said in that review, but Siggy was very adamant and very angry about Shiki's decision, even saying that he made the wrong choice. And as he said to Elsie, he cannot predict what is happening. For this all seems to suggest to me that something did happen in that universe that Siggy knew about. He knew that he would die. That is why he said he made the wrong choice. Because now he has defied the future that was meant to happen. But that doesn't exactly explain who Shiki or Siggy really is. Yes, I'm saying that because people still cannot drop the fact that Shiki and Siggy are probably the same character. It doesn't help that when we see him in this chapter, he practically has the same design, but we'll get to that later. And but I'm just saying that if they all die, then how the hell could Shiki be Siggy? Unless, of course, there's something else. However, now that we get into the universes, it's likely that maybe multiverses has changed something as well, but in a distant future. So now they ask about Connor and theorize the thing. In Universe 1, he was a shipwrecked and was the captain of Eden's one, but it died. In Universe 2, he was the captain of Siggy's crew and seemingly followed him because he believed in his propaganda. And now, in Universe 3, he was drifting and escaping from a robot factory that was controlled by Siggy and seemingly had no connection to Eden Zero, but worked for Siggy even though he didn't know it. So it's here that Noah says that as how the other things work in the multiverse. If a world changes, the history of its people can change from what they once were. Because this also seems to suggest that there is something other that has changed as well. You know, I feel one of the most common theory about Siggy is, how did such a good character suddenly become so evil? He had mentioned to the Dark Star that he has simply lost his memory, but I feel like there has to be something else. So what if it is the cat leaper that changed Siggy? They remember that side, but that Siggy was in a side where he was evil, because in fact it doesn't explain just how quickly he built the Dark Stars. Yes, it may very well just be that he lost his memory and all that stuff, but if multiverse affect characters, who is to say it didn't affect Siggy? It's just that no one else remembers that because, well, they just remember that. I'm just saying, it could very well be that possible as well. Because again, it doesn't explain how he revived. Granted, it may very well be that he just lost his memory, became a good guy, and then suddenly received his memory back and became evil again. But we'll see about it. But if other universe can change as well. I mean, it did change Jin's outfit. Also in Universe 2. So who else could have changed? I don't know. However, he still seems to teach Pino foul language. And Rebecca is still skeptic, but she seems to believe that maybe he is a good guy, or maybe not that good, even though Shiki says that he is not that bad of a guy. But she still cannot stop thinking about the fact that the universe where Shiki got killed and when they all were destroyed. She has hope they can have the happy ending here. The two Star maidens then talk to Elsie if she knows about the planet. And she mentions the planet, and there is a planet that was an industrial planet and that was shut down many years ago. Very ideal for Siggy then to turn into a robot factory. They will head there and they will all fight together, or at least Elsie will destroy it elsewhere. And then we see the planet Lendard, and yes, it's a very big industrial planet indeed, where tons and tons of skeleton armies being manufactured. And it's here we see the Dark Stars. Yes, and I even mean the other two, because I actually wondered, there's no way, well, that the Killer and Brigade is not going to be there. However, we do see them here, but they have completely new designs and likely new characters, because they are the Mark II. We see Wizard, and he is unchanged. Granted, he wasn't destroyed in these last 3 years, so it makes sense. We see Clown, and his mask seems a little bit more expressive than before. And it's now that we see Brigadine and Killer, and they're called Brigadine Mark II and Killer Mark II. And so how can we describe Brigade? Well, he looks a little bit more human, I guess. He has a lion-like mask and a different set of armor on him that seems to expose his neck. He talks about one day it'll surpass machines and surpasses even them. Well, that's a scary thought. And Killer, well, Killer basically looked like an Assassin's Creed character in my book. He now has a hood on and a thing covering his mask that is now very human-like, just like Wizard. Basically, it looks like a young pretty boy. You know, there were some characters that actually compare these to Final Fantasy VII villains, with Wizard being Sephiroth, Clown being Kefka, but the other two I don't recall that much, even though I am known of Fairy Tail. And finally we see Siggy, now in a little thicker armor, but still wears the same thing. And many pointed out that he has the exact same belts as Shiki. Of course he has, they're both demon kings, but no, people still believe that Siggy is Shiki. And even if that is the case, we still need an answer to that question on why that is the case. Either way though, when I said in the beginning, is this reaching the end game? Because Siggy is saying, Shiki is coming. We'll stay here to fight. We are going to settle this. That is what makes me wonder, is this the end game? Because he is after all the final antagonist, the main big bad. And we still haven't seen the other two, Orashin says Galactica. So unless they are not here, then I do not believe this is the end game. But will they lose this battle? Well, given the fact that Eden Zero always seems to lose, maybe. But if they win, shut down this factory, then what is Siggy going to do? That's what worries me. Because if it doesn't get destroyed here, what will happen? But this does confirm he can rebuild his Dark Stars. But likely they do not have the same kind of characters like the other two. Because maybe he just rebuilt them, he didn't really revive them. It's after all called Mark II, improved it at all. So maybe Wizard and Clown will be destroyed here, but then he will create Mark II versions of them too. Well, we don't really know. And it doesn't seem like he has created any other supporter in his Eden's 1. But now it is implied that Connor is no longer captaining that ship. And never were. Universes, multiverses, am I right? So damn confusing. But that's basically this chapter. A battle is heading. What awaits us next? It's up to us to decide. Give me your thoughts if you have any.